welcome to Matt's Mission Marine, your home for my take on boats, waterways, conversations along the way. As always, guys, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, ringing the bell and selecting all so you don't miss any of my content. Today we're going to talk to Chad, a friend of mine I've known for 20 years. And then he's going to tell us about a trip that he went on and he didn't come back with the boat. Thank God you're here with us, first off.
I've had some close calls, but that was definitely the closest call. Checked the bilge pumps, they were working. Did a radio check here as we were idling through the cut. It worked. We had a good plan. Everything was fine. The boat ran well going out there. All the electronics, all the instrumentation. We go to get on plane, and the boat didn't want to get on plane. The engines were fine, and I had this sinking feeling in my stomach. And basically opened the back compartment that goes down the bilge, and that triangular cross section from the front to the back was full of water. So we're hitting the manual bilge pumps, and nothing's happening. And I go to get the flares. So I'm like, this is our chance because there's not a soul out here. So I go to get the flares, load one in. It was, I'm ready for it to go off. Click, nothing happens. I said, guys, let's try to get this water out of the boat, and we're going to try to get this other boat's attention. We got a big problem. And so that pursuit, that particular boat had a big fish box that goes transverse, and it's in the hull. You can't get under it. It's part of the hull. A bucket would have been great. It wouldn't fit in there. So we had different types of Tuppermade and Rubbermaid Tupperware products and stuff like that for rigs and carrying different baits, stuff like that. So we found some that were shallow enough to go in this and turn and try to get some out. We also had a handheld bilge pump. So it almost looks like a long bicycle pump, but it's for pumping water out. It's 4 boats. So we had all that pumped out and had ice in there. But we were trying to get the water out that was under the boat that had accumulated while we were fishing that day. And so all this is going on. Those guys are back there trying to basically, carry water out of the bilge, transfer it out of there the best they can. One of the guys is on this manual bilge pump. You get maybe get half a gallon per stroke, and some of them pump in both directions. And we had it kind of jury rig so it would stay overboard the outlet, and so you could just really concentrate on pumping it out. So one guy pumping out, another guy trying to bail or transfer water out of there. I'm trying to get attention of this other boat, and David is just maintaining a heading home. We're over 50 miles out, and we're just trying to get home. So at 8 knots, it's going to take us a long time. It's going to take over 6 hours to get there, right? So this is going on, and I'm going, okay, none of this is working. We're still calling Maydays quite frequently, but not having a lot of faith. We can hear everything, but in my mind, the transmitter portion of that's not going out. I didn't know though. I just knew the one boat didn't respond to us. And so we're all working, and at this moment in time, I come really with this face to face that we're going to be spending the night out here. Like, this boat's going to be going down, it's going to the bottom, because water was this high over the top of the battery. So there were 3 batteries, like group 31, nice healthy batteries in there. To this day, I don't know how the engines ran as long as they did. I don't know how the electronics that were working worked, not being shorted out in the salt water. But I was praying. I was like, Lord, please help us get home. And we had to make a decision at that point that, okay, we're in 68 degree waters, call it, and it's 58 on the beach. There's a big difference on how long your body can last and maintain before hypothermia sets in. 58 degree water, you might even have cold water shock at that point. So we're thinking, what should we do? We've got this cone of uncertainty of, told everyone roughly where we're going. Edisto Banks is kind of a big area. We're in the Gulf Stream, so the current's running probably 2 or 3 knots. So, over 10 hours, you could be 30 miles, to find a boat out there, or maybe just people, maybe the boat's gone in 30 hours. What do we do? So we just decided to, let's tighten up on that cone of uncertainty and accept the risk that we may be in colder water when we come out of this boat. Like, it was a reality that was going to happen. So we marched forward at, the 8 knots we could maintain. And, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that, we had plenty of fuel, the boat was full, the vents purged out, so I knew that was all it could hold. The fuel gauges didn't work, but that didn't really concern me because it was like 200 gallons of fuel in the boat. It was no problem. We go out there and fish and come back. But not with that much weight in it and not running at 8 knots under that much load. I'm thinking it's a good probability we might run out of fuel before we get there. So either the boat could sink or we could run out of fuel. And so as we're working on this, we had a live bait well pump that was in there that had an extra port on it that had a plug in it, which is common. Some of those you can run a washdown pump off of that extra port, but it was blocked off, and it was working. The bilge pumps weren't. We couldn't get them working. So we went in there and we took turns trying to reach under way down in this compartment in a small area, and we tried to get this plug out. The seacock was shut off, but we were trying to get the intake. We were going to rearrange the intake for this bait well pump to push the water out of the boat. And so we took turns, and every time I was in there, my head was under the water and it was dark in there. And I had this sensation was, this is what it's going to feel like tonight. I'm going to be out here in the dark and my head's going to be coming in and out of the water in these waves, because the waves were building. We finally got that plug out, cut that pump on, unhooked the hoses where we had it overboard, and so now we had a pump that was pumping. We had the manual bilge pump, and then we had these Rubbermaid containers where we were getting maybe a gallon each time or so, maybe a gallon and a half. But we're not really maintaining the level. And I'm thinking, we hit something in my mind. I'm like, either a through hole came out of the boat or we hit something. But water's coming in, and all we're doing is we're maintaining. But we're going to keep maintaining, and we're going to keep doing what we're doing, and the engines are still running, and we're going to work our way home. And this whole time, we're still calling Mayday, Mayday, and Mayday. And this went on for several hours. That time of year, it starts getting dark around 5:30. So we had been in this for about 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours, and it was around 5:30. And we're calling, and still no response. And this time we had made hundreds of Mayday calls, no response. But we can hear it. We could hear other traffic sometimes come on the radio. Our chart plotter was working. We had a compass, so that wasn't a problem getting home, but the chart plotter was working. We had our cell phones, but they're not good for more than 10, 12 miles, something like that. We're still trying to send text messages, just hoping that we could get a bounce or a skip, but we didn't know. We weren't getting any response there. But everybody was calm, nobody panicked, and it took all 4 of us to have a job to keep the boat basically floating. And we were rotating. I mean, it was very strenuous. In my mind, I'm thinking, I want to keep bailing water, but I also want to preserve myself and not have, I just don't want to have some kind of breakdown. I want to be able to keep my mental focus, because it was really a mental thing at that point, but the physical part was the fatigue was catching up with everybody on the boat. And so we were rotating the different jobs, but man, everybody on there was hustling, and we were doing all we could. And about that point in the day, it started getting kind of dusk, kind of like this. And at that point, I'm thinking, we're gonna make it. And I said, if we get up near close to the beach, I'm running this sucker up on the beach, man. Like, I don't care, it's going up on the sand. I don't care what it is. We're gonna run up somewhere, whatever's closest. If it's Folly Beach, whatever it's gonna be, it's probably gonna be Morris Island, but we're just gonna run it up. And so I'm thinking, okay, that's the plan, and we're working. We're still, we're getting up on top of the T-top, holding our phones as high as we can get them, and still no signal. And Ryan, we're sitting there talking, and he goes, man, he's like, I don't understand it. He's like, we did a radio check, this thing was working. He's like, what's wrong with it? And I said, dude, I don't know. And he's like, what can we do? And I said, well, the only thing we haven't done, I said, I can check the connection. I said, this radio's inside this console. It's got a head and like almost like not a cabin, but it's a big head on that boat, and like almost like a little galley area. So it's a lot of room. It's real dry. It doesn't get much corrosion. But I said, we can try to figure out what's going on. And so we pull the console back and go in there, and we look at it. All the connections look fine. I take the radio, the coax for the antenna. I take it off. It all looks fine. I'll check the connections. It's soldered in. It's not crimped. I'm like, man, this is a legitimate. Everything looks good. So I plug it back in. We call one more Mayday, and we get a response back. And it was real like gargled up. And about that time, basically before that Mayday went through, one of the engines locked up. Like, because if you can imagine the amount of weight that was in the boat, the cowlings were down in the water. I mean, there was like this much room of the engine sticking up, and with waves going over them. There were times the waves were going over the engines, and the air intakes are at the top and the back. And on the starboard engine, it made a sound I've never heard of. I've locked up and had them catch on fire and on the other boats. This thing made a terrible sound, and it just locked up. We hit the key, and the starter, like, it didn't do anything. Like, it hit, and the engine just didn't move. And I'm like, okay, that one's done. So, and we were adjusting trim tabs and engine trim on the boat, trying to get the rear end lifted. We were trying to move weight to the front and the back and figure out what would help get weight out of the, get water out of the boat. And now we were down on one engine, and we were going slower, and there was more water coming in the boat now. We were actually sitting lower in the water because we had the trim tabs down, we had the engines trimmed all the way in, and at the RPM they were running, even though the boat was going slow, we had some extra lift there. And with that one engine down, now it was a few inches lower in the water. And so, we're working on, we get this Mayday out after that, and about probably, they came back, David was making the call, and the Coast Guard came back on there, and we're trying to give coordinates. We're saying, we're 10, 11 nautical miles out. We're kind of near the Charleston 60, but we gave a heading to the jetties of the shipping channel. So, they knew about where we were. And the transmission was real gargled. We were given our lat long GPS coordinates as well. I don't know if they could hear them because we could barely hear them coming back. But about that time, it was probably only about 30 seconds into it, they said, okay, can you send up a flare? And David said, no flares, none of them were. And, they said, do you want to send a helicopter? And I said, no. I said, no, we're okay. The other engine went off, shut down. I think it spun a hub is what happened, or either the gear case let go, because the engine would rev up, there was nothing, it was like it was in neutral. And we were trying to shift it, nothing happened. And basically at that point, a lot of water started coming in the boat. And it was much calmer in there, but it was still probably a 3-foot swell, but real calm, no white caps. But the boat was so low, every time these little swells would come by, and one of them blew the transom door open. And then when it did, it was like a wall of water, and Eric said, we are not okay. And David said, yes, send the helicopter. And basically, from when he made that transmission, it was less than a minute. That boat was upside down.
Wow.
And we were in the water.
U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard. Yeah, we're up. Barely copying you here.
Is that the last time? Do you have a flare on board so you can pop on?
No, we do not. Negative on any flares. They went out.
Alright, 6145, do you see us?
Hold on. Yeah, keep coming straight. Right at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. You see us?
6545, we have you inside.
Copy. What do you want us to do? getting off this boat. I'm getting off this boat. Man overboard!
All that stuff, when it, we were talking about it, it had T-top and outriggers. Make sure you don't get hung up in anything. It's not going to sink like the Titanic. It's going to get enough water in it to where it's going to be unstable, and it's going to just roll over. And that's exactly what it did, except it rolled real hard to port, and then it came back to starboard, and I didn't think it was going to come back, and then it did. And then when it went back to port, it just kept rolling. And David and Eric jumped off the bow. Ryan and myself, he was with me. We kind of walked up the side of the boat and over, and didn't even go in the water. It's kind of weird. We just kind of followed the boat over, and we were sitting on the hull. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna find out why this thing's leaking. I'm looking for a hole. We hit a container or something out here, and I'm on my hands and knees, and there wasn't any hole. There was no damage to the bottom of the boat. So I was like, I don't know what happened. I couldn't figure it out. It didn't really matter at that point. And we see this boat coming at us, and then we see the helicopter coming, and we're waving. He makes a pass right over us, and I don't think he saw us at first because the boat had black bottom paint on it, and there was only about this much of the hull sticking out of the water, and on that dead rise, maybe this wide, black, and it was dusk like this. We had life jackets on, but they went right over us, and we were waving, and they turned around, and there was another boat coming, and it happened to be a pilot boat for Charleston Harbor.
Right.
And what had happened was they heard the transmission, they heard how much water was in the boat, and they decided they were, good Samaritans, they're gonna come too.
Yeah.
Because the Coast Guard sent the helicopter from Johns Island, basically where it's based out of, and then they were gonna send one of their crew boats, which is here in Charleston Harbor, but it's not super fast. I don't know, maybe 30 knots, I don't know what it runs. So they were gonna send that, but the pilot boat was only a few miles from us, so they said, and it's a 70-foot boat, it's their biggest one, and they said, we're going to them. And so they got to us. At that point, they had talked to the guys in the helicopter, and they had said, okay, I think we'll get to them, everything's fine, be on standby. So they stayed in the perimeter, and the pilot boat came up, and we basically all transferred on and got on the boat, and we got in there and got blankets on because the water was 58 degrees. Luckily, we were only in the water a few minutes.
Thank God.
And everybody on the boat was in, athletic, in good shape. Wasn't really a problem. But, for a few minutes, it wasn't a problem. But for a longer period of time, it definitely could have been a problem. And we got on the boat, and apparently we had some text messages that went out right before the boat rolled over. And they went out, to her, my girlfriend at the time, Laura, and their wives. And they had hopped in their cars and started coming down, down to the Coast Guard station because they didn't know what they just knew there was a big problem, and that we had made contact with the Coast Guard, and they were coming to get us. And it was kind of like we were in shock in a way, and part of the way I felt like I kind of like let the crew down because it's like the boat didn't make it, but man, we did everything we could do, and it's easy to go back and hindsight's 20/20, but
right.
There's probably some things I tried that I didn't try then, but I've been on some boats that came real close to sinking a couple of times in my life before this, but this was, we didn't come back with the boat, and it was kind of like a solemn thing, and it was almost like the scene out of a movie. When we got on down to the dock there at the mega dock at the city marina, we pulled up about the time that all the girls got there, and Eric's wife at the time, she was pregnant, and very pregnant, very
Wow.
visible, and Laura and her mom and Natalie, and they're coming down, and we're coming off the boat, and they're all running down to the dock. They don't know if we're all okay, and it was like we're all hugging, and it was like it put literally it put everything in perspective, you know,
Yeah.
and what's really important in life.
Absolutely.
And you know, it definitely changed my outlook, you know, on a lot of things. And even to this day, when I get on a boat, I do a lot of extra safety checks. I mean, you know, I've been on boats and there's, you know, the other thing was I have an EPIRB, but it was on a different boat 200 miles away, so it wasn't, you know, an EPIRB would have definitely saved us.
Yeah.
You know, now I'm on boats and it's like there's like 4 EPIRBs, a life raft, all this stuff, but
Yeah.
you know, you take for granted all these things, and it's like, yeah, there's people that go out all the time and don't have that, but if you're going offshore, you really need an EPIRB, and we have that from now on. And
Yeah.
you know, even a life raft, like a legit, you know, life raft that saves your life, you know, that you can deploy,
Right.
and all those things. So to play offshore, you need to have that. But you know, the thing is, when boats sink and you have these type of catastrophic events, it's never just one thing. It's a multiple failure issue that happens. It's like a chain reaction. So the flares didn't work, the mirror didn't work, the VHF didn't work, the bilge pumps weren't working. All these things, I could give a list of stuff that literally was working the night before and quit working.
Wow.
So, you know, handheld radio, you know, that we could call that other boat. You know, you get 5 miles out of it, or put an adapter for an 8-foot radio and get a little bit more out of that 5 watts. I mean, there's stuff you can do, but at the end of the day, it's like everything can break though. So
Yeah.
it's good to have that redundancy. But you know, even after that, I had like a little bit of PTSD going offshore. It's like, you know, I was thinking twice, you know, really. And I still, you know, that part's kind of diminished some, but you know, it impacted all of us on that boat, everybody. I mean, it was very close call. And you know, the newspaper didn't really get the whole article, and that happens a lot today. You
Right.
get half the story, so you kind of have to judge the source. But they had put in there that, you know, boat had capsized at the Charleston 60, which is barely out of sight of land, and that didn't tell the story at all. I mean, that was, I'm glad we got that close, because I mean, we were way out there, and if the boat had capsized offshore without an EPIRB and without exact location, man, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened.
Well, thankfully God was looking over you that
Yeah.
day, and was able to get you guys back in safe and sound, and you're here with us today. And
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk to us today.
As always, guys, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, ringing the bell, and selecting all so you don't miss any of my content. Got some really good stuff coming out there for you guys. Really need your support. Thanks, guys. Alright, guys, until next time, strap on those life vests and get going. See you soon on the waters.